About 2 years ago, I was working with Python and I just stumbled in YouTube and found one of your videos, Connor. And I found out like you can express like a sum with a plus slash, and the slash just puts the plus between each. And like that's so simple. That's amazing.
Welcome to episode 68 of Raycast. I'm your host, Connor, and today with us we have a special guest who we will get to introducing in a few minutes. But first we're going to go around and do brief introductions. We'll start with Bob, then go to Adam, then go to Marshall.
I'm Bob Terrio, and I'm a J enthusiast and working crazily on the wiki right now so that I'm actually not doing Advent of Code.
I'm Adam Botsevsky. I'm doing language stuff at Dialog, APL, that is. And I'm working crazily on getting our upcoming release done.
I'm Marshall Lockbaum. I've been through a lot of array languages. I'm the creator of BQN and the creator of Singelic.
And as mentioned before, my name's Connor, polyglot programmer, massive fan of all of the array languages. And with that, we're going to hop into a couple of announcements, and we will start with, I think, Bob, and then we'll go to Adam. I think there's like a number of announcements in there. We'll go from there. Take it away, Bob.
Okay, so I have teased this for a while, probably about 6 weeks, I think. But we have released the J Viewer, which gives you the option to look through code and forum posts and the wiki and Rosetta code and GitHub and all sorts of things for J. So it's done by Ed Gottsman. He deserves a ton of credit for this. He's been working on it a long time. But it's finally at the point that if you would like, you can go to the wiki page, and we'll include a link in the show notes. And you need to run JQT, and you need to be running J9.4. But once you've got those requirements, then it's fairly easy to open up the J Viewer. And the only other thing I should mention is I think it takes about a gigabyte of space on your computer, because what it does is it downloads that, and then from that you do all your searches and stuff. And it's lightning fast. And as I said, it goes through all the forum posts. You can do searches on code, look at all the places that certain combinations show up. It's really quite amazing. So that's my announcement.
And I think to add to your announcement, you actually posted more than 2 weeks ago a short video previewing that on your YouTube channel, which we didn't announce last episode because you wanted to wait till now. So if people don't want to download it or just want to check it out before downloading it, there will be a link in the show notes to that video. I think it's only a couple minutes long and sort of gives you a really nice preview. So
it's about 5 minutes long, and there's actually a link to it on the wiki page too. So the link, we'll put both links in. But yeah,
we'll put all the links in.
All the links will be there. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. We'll move over to Adam then for his announcements.
Right. So two things. Kind of related. One is the APL Seeds event, which is this online meeting for people who are interested in APL or just getting started with APL. And that's going to be March 27. So you have some advance notice now. We don't have everything settled yet as to what's going to be in it, but and it might be a little bit different than the previous years. I'm sure it's going to be interesting though. As soon as we have something, we'll make sure to announce further on that. And then there's on the other half of the year, in the fall or the autumn, depending where you are, might even be the spring, Dialog arranges its traditional user meeting. And this has been going on for many years now. And we are in the process of shaking up in a few things in a Dialog. And we really want to know, what is it that make people come or not come to the user meeting, and what is it that people would like to see and experience at such meetings? What works, what doesn't work? Even for those people who have never been, why didn't they go, even if they were interested in the subject? So we're going to leave a link to a survey that you can fill out. We'd appreciate that, so that we can try to maybe change some things and make it more attractive.
Awesome. And wait, were the dates mentioned for Apple Seeds? Did I space out for like 10 seconds right when you mentioned them? I think I did.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday, March 27, 2024.
March 27th. I think I did temporarily start thinking about an Advent of Code problem and BQN trains and combinators versus jelly. So I started drifting off at the exact wrong time, and I'm listening to these announcements. I'm like, wait, he didn't even mention the date. And I was like, wait a second. I must have just not been listening. Being a terrible host, March 27th. Very exciting, folks. I think this is going to be, what, the third edition of Appleseeds?
Might even be the fourth.
Might even be the fourth.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think it's if it is going to be the same as it was in the past, it's an online free conference, half a day. As far as virtual, I'm just like plugging this, even though I don't work for Dialogue, but it's a great conference because it's short, it's sweet, it's online, it's completely free, and I think, there's a lot of virtual conferences that'll last for like a week or something. And it's kind of hard to attend a virtual conference when you still got work to do and stuff. But like an afternoon of 4 hours, whatever, super easy to take that off, watch some nice talks. I think they have a Zoom chat and whatnot. And there's a little get together afterwards where you can chat one-on-one with people. Anyways, links.
That's how it has been until now. I think we might be changing things a bit on the format there as well, and we might even go more than half a day. We might do like a continuous stream of all day long, depending on the time zones you can join in. We'll see.
All right. Well, I take back everything I just said then. Okay, it's going to be a 24-hour live stream for all time zones, and
no, I didn't. I'm not promising that, but we'll see. We'll figure something out.
I do know there are conferences. There's a Java conference that's famous for that. It's like a virtual 24-hour, and they just continuously talk, and some people try and stay up for the whole thing. But anyways, links to all the things we just mentioned. I think I was going to mention too that I did a couple more Jelly streams. I also made a Jelly versus BQN YouTube video. We'll throw links for that in the show notes, but we'll talk about Jelly another day. Let's get to introducing our guest today. I'm going to attempt, I think we actually did announce his name on a previous podcast. I will do my best attempt, and then either Adam or Brian himself can correct me, because I think they both know how to say it correctly. It's Brian Ellingsgaard. Is that pretty?
No. So Adam pronounces it differently, actually. Brian Ellingsgaard is how I pronounce it in Faroese.
Wow, that was very far off.
But if you're gonna Englishise it, then it's Brian Ellingsgaard.
Okay.
Although Adam pronounces it in Danish, which is Brian Ellingsgaard, eller Ellingsgaard.
All right, so we've got 3 different pronunciations. Sounds like I'm gonna fail at the. And how do you pronounce the language? It's
Faroese.
Faroese?
Faroese, yeah.
So let's hear that one more time from you, and then I'll do my best to say it that way, but it's not going to happen.
Brian Ellingsgaard.
Brian Ellingsgaard.
It's okay.
All right, we're probably going to stick with Brian for today.
Yes.
But we've mentioned Brian, I think at least on one other episode, potentially not by name in 2 of them, because Brian is the individual behind the Rayed-BQN library, which David... at least through his videos, has made a couple different videos making little snake games and different types of games. I myself have played around with it and downloaded it locally. I think I even opened an issue.
Yes.
And we might have gone back and forth.
Thank you so much for that.
No, you're the one doing the work. I'm just pointing out things that aren't, and then you're fixing it for me, which is fantastic. So we're here today. I guess this is the episode, the first of maybe 1 or 2 episodes that we mentioned back a couple months ago, where we said we were going to dive into the game programming in array languages. And Brian is our first guest to talk about that. So I'm not sure if you want to give us a brief introduction and sort of how you stumbled into the array language world, or we can also pivot and do the advent of code, because we mentioned we might chat a bit about advent of code because it is December of a year, depending on when you're listening to this, 2023, which means all the programmers are trying to code golf, solutions. It's been pretty bad this year, if you ask me. But over to you, Brian. Maybe a brief introduction, and then we can go from there.
Okay. I'm Brian Ellingsgaard. I'm the creator of Rayed-BQN, which is a BQN library. I've made a few BQN libraries that I'm very happy of, but Rayed-BQN is definitely my favorite and my passion project throughout the last few months.
How did you discover the array languages? And I can't say this with full confidence, but I'm guessing that you are probably our youngest guest. Is that of all the guests we have, it looks like, I don't know how old you are, but I would say that you're either, high school or university, or, we might need to cut that if you're actually like 20 years older than what you are, but you look quite young compared to our other guests.
I am 18 years old currently.
Okay, yeah. So I think definitely that makes you our youngest guest by far, which is very exciting that you've already got a bunch of these libraries out. So yeah, and it's been not directly mentioned, but you live in the Faroe Islands, which for those of you that don't know is quite remote compared to, where most of us are based, and either on, Europe mainland or, Canada or the USA. So yeah, like is there a big thriving BQN community in the Faroe Islands, or is it just you? Like how did you stumble into array languages in BQN?
I have never seen anyone else interested in the array languages here, but I will say one coworker actually knew about APL. So that's cool.
That's pretty good.
I have tried introducing people to the languages, but no one is like interested really. But that's too bad. They're missing out.
Their time will come. Their time will come, you know?
Yeah, that time will come. How I got introduced to the language or the array paradigm itself. About 2 years ago, I was with working with Python, and I just stumbled in YouTube and found one of your videos, Connor. And I found out like you can express like a sum with a plus slash, and the slash just puts the plus between each. And like that's so simple. That's amazing. I was so amazed with this. I then just watched more of your videos, and each symbol, I learned what each symbol did, and then I tried myself and try APL, of course. And I was just every line I wrote, I was amazed. And then I got into like puzzles, and I did not know what to do because like you can't just loop your way out of it. I was thinking like, how do you loop? How do you repeat stuff? And then I used the repeat modifier to mutate a variable. And then more and more as I did more of these in the first dialogue competition 2 years ago. Or no, not the first, but yeah, my first. I did these loops and stuff and it didn't work. So I tried using array thinking, and with the help of your videos, I actually got somewhat great solutions. I'm very happy with them. And in fact, that competition, I actually won 1,500 kroner or $200 because I got one of the phase 2 prizes, the getting the randomized participants, I think it's called.
Making money. Look at that, folks. Making money off of learning the array languages.
I was so happy. I even I had to ask my head teacher for a confirmation that I'm a student there, and I bragged so hard. It was very fun.
That's awesome. And when you started doing puzzles, do you mean like the dialogue competition, like kind of one-liner leak code kind of questions like that?
Yes, yes. Oh, I actually asked some of my friends to join in, online friends, that is, and we had lots of fun. Me and some guy called Dan, we did them together. And honestly, we thought it was golfing, so we golfed solutions and told each other character counts.
I mean, that's a very common thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, one solution, I got one less character than him, and I was bragging the entire day. I told him like a year ago, actually, like a year later after the competition, and he was like, "Yeah, I wouldn't have seen that." I was very happy.
I mean, I mean, we're all kindred spirits here, but there is something very gratifying. Like that's something with the jelly language is they literally optimize, like they will search for token sequences and then add primitives to replace that. So, you know, it seems like random. Why would they have this very specific thing? And then you stumble across it and you're like, oh, that's a replacement for like a 4 token sequence. And it shows up like 4 different places. And you're like, I don't know. Most people are probably listening to this. Or I don't know. We probably have an array audience in general, but it does sound a little bit odd to be like, wow, why are you so thrilled with like shaving off 2 or 3 or even 1 character? But there is something very gratifying about it.
Well, it's measurable, right? I mean, if you write like some code that's really beautiful, I mean, you can say, oh yes, it's beautiful, but you don't know it's beautiful. You just think it's beautiful. If you know it's 10 characters long, then it's 10 characters long, and that's that, right? So you get it there and you say, aha,
yeah,
there's a one moment of I have it now.
Especially when you discuss, like it actually just happened, not to bring up Avanaco, but I think it was day 2 where it had like, you know, some different colored balls in bags and you needed to do some operations. And in Python, you have a counter collection, which is like a dictionary, and they have operations defined on counters. So you can compare counters. You basically like, if you want to check if all of the values in one dictionary are less than all the values for the corresponding keys in another, you can just do a less than comparison between these 2 collections. And that was part A. And then for part B, you can actually do a max reduction over counters that like take the maximum values for the corresponding keys. And I had just written a lambda a comma b colon a pipe b. And then Jeremy Howard, previous guest of ArrayCast, pointed out that in the operator module, you can use the or underscore, which is basically just like a shorthand form of not having to explicitly write out that max reduction. Now, on the Array podcast, we're all thinking that's very silly because that's built into the language. Like to do a max reduction is just, 2 characters. But in Python, because lambdas are very verbose, they've had to add this module where and then there's an or keyword, so they have to put an underscore after the or so it doesn't clash. But anyways, when he pointed that out, I was like, oh, that's very nice. I can replace my lambda a comma b colon a, pipe b with 3 characters. And it does look like a lot better. And also, like, that's exactly what it was designed for, right? Like, so that you don't need to handwrite these, like, very common, Lambda expressions, because they're not very nice in Python. Anyways, away from Python, back to you. So you're golfing these things, trying to get, 1 character less, having a blast with your friend Dan. And at some point you just start to dive deeper and deeper, and then you end up writing all these different libraries. Like what caused that? Or you were just enjoying the languages so much?
I love the language, and then my a real passion of mine was writing games.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually started writing this game in Dialog APL with the Windows system.
Mm-hmm.
I even tried showing Adam this when I was visiting him in Denmark. Do you remember that, Adam?
Of course. Yeah.
I don't remember if I got the game to work because it had glitches. I didn't know GitHub at the time, you know?
Right. You had no way to post me the code, so to show me. So yeah, yes. But I think Brian is the only one while I've been at Dialog, who is like an APL enthusiast to just show up at our office. So he came, not just he came, like he came with an entourage of his father and his grandfather. And they all trekked out to Northern Zealand and Denmark and showed up at our tiny little office. And it was cozy, and Morten was there, and we had a blast all day long.
Wait, this is like the coolest story ever. You just decided to do like a some kind of mini trip to visit the Dialog headquarters, and you showed up and got to meet the...
It wasn't our headquarters though. We have 2 offices, one in Denmark, one in England. And people in general are welcome to come visit. The English office probably a bit more interesting than the Danish one, but hey, Brian came to Denmark and he came visiting. It was very nice.
Interesting. So the HQ is the one in England?
Yes.
Oh, I've always assumed, because a lot of the past user meetings have been in Denmark, I think, or at least I've seen videos. But interesting.
Yeah, I don't think there's a good venue that they have in England. I don't know why.
It's also way, way more expensive going to England than it is.
Yeah, very much.
Anyway, so you hop over to Denmark, and you're showing Adam your attempt at a bit of a glitchy game, but it's
Yeah, I was in Denmark for family reasons, but I thought, why not visit Dialog? Because, I mean, I had the idea, and then I talked with Adam about it, and he was, like, fine with it. And I talked with my dad about it, and it's fine. And then we just went, and it's great. And Adam had to help me with the train system, because I did not know how to travel through Denmark trains.
It's funny, when you first said that, I was like, what? You talked about combinators on your first visit, but no, you meant like... actual trains.
We've got special trains in Denmark.
Yeah, they're not the easiest thing to figure out, but they're not terrible.
No, but I've never been at a train before. There's no train system in Faroe Islands, you know?
Oh yeah, that checks out. Yeah, so it would be a pretty confusing thing for the first time.
So you were one of the few people who did APL trains before you did railways.
Yay! After that awesome time with Adam showing off my game, I realized that the project for that game stopped, since the Windows system definitely wasn't made for 60 frames per second games, because it starts flashing at 60 if you try to refresh it that often, right? Because I assume it was just made for Windows applications, just normal GUI applications. But okay, that's fine. I then got to some other projects. My Discord bot is my other project that I work very hard on. And then I that I found out the APL Discord existed. I didn't know that for a long time. Oh wait, no, this was way before I met Adam, but that's fine.
I think you were on there pretty early. It had only been around for like less than a year, definitely a few months.
I think I remember you exclaiming in the APL Orchard something like, "Oh wow, the Discord!"
Yeah, because I was very active in Discord, and I was amazed that there was a community there. I then talked with Azama once about how BQN is cool, and then I decided to try it, and it was very, very cool. At first, I just tried it. I dipped my toes in, and then I kept working with APL and Python. And my Discord bot is in Python, just so yeah, that's cleared. But as I did more and more BQN, I had tons of fun with it. And then I found out Raylib was a C library, which is very functional in nature. Like you can just, there's no state in it. It's just great in that sense. And I tried linking to it sometime. Actually, I saw an example in the Discord on this, and I then twiddled with it a bit, and I just made a standalone library, and that's when I started with Rayed-BQN.
So you were in the Faroe Islands. You end up visiting Adam in Denmark. You're playing around with the APL and the windowing system, reaching the limits there. You find the Discord. You see an example, and then that just inspired you to try and build a library, and then here we are today. You are.
Oh, yes.
That's fantastic. I mean, there's a bunch of things I could ask, and I think Marshall, you have a couple directions, but I'm always curious, especially because it sounds like, I'm not sure when you visited Denmark, but it sounds like you've been, like, how many years have you been playing around with APL and BQN?
Ooh, I'd say about 2.5 years.
Okay. And what is it that, you said you've tried to convince friends and they're just not interested? Are you just special and like you have a fondness for them? Like, because there seems to be, I've heard on different podcasts from different folks, some people, they immediately fall in love with the language. Other folks, they kind of bounce off of it. Other folks, they think it looks weird. What is it, do you think, about the languages? Like, I know you talked about how you saw the plus reduce and that was it. You saw that. Is that it? Like, just for some people, there's a spark or something that happens and other folks just don't have that spark?
So I hadn't learned Python very long. I've only been using Python for like 1 month max.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been using JavaScript for maybe 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
I think a huge part of it was I wasn't introduced to any other language that deeply. I hadn't, I hadn't locked my brain in with that, right? So I think when I saw the language and just how much easier it was with what I was doing, just playing around writing scripts, it seemed like a much better language for my use case. And the beauty in the expressions also caught my eye a lot, and that motivated me to just I wanted to work with this. And
so the key is we gotta get folks before they've been corrupted by big Python.
I think that is really true. I'm teaching a lot of people APL on all kinds of levels, and I can definitely feel a difference when people have a CS degree. Then it becomes very difficult for them to grasp APL, even with the best of will. Right? I'm not talking about them. I don't think it's not because they've seen something else and they can't relate to this thing. It's just these patterns and the way of thinking. It's just been settled in some odd way that makes it hard for them to grasp how APL works.
Yeah. All right, Marshall. I'll throw it over to you for a second. I know that you had a couple things that you wanted to make sure that we chatted about.
Yeah, well, I was saying, now that we've gotten introductions out of the way, we could do a little segment on Advent of Code, since most people here have at least interacted with it in some way. So it's running now. We're currently on day 5, which is really just killing everyone as far as I can tell.
I literally have part B running in the background, and I know that that's not the way you're supposed to do it, but I'm like, we got to record this for like an hour and a half. Like, my brute force solution on part B may or may not actually provide me an answer in 45 minutes. So stay tuned, folks.
Which language is this?
This is in Python. I've done all of them in Python and a little bit of APL and BQN. I will say, actually keep going. I'll save my remark for a little bit.
I didn't have anything else to say. I was just introducing the topic.
Okay, perfect. Then I will insert my remark. Well, so in general, we will leave links. I am assuming most folks have heard of Advent of Code, but in case we have a new listener that just entered the programming world, every year in December, from December 1st to I believe the 24th or 25th, there are problems every night at midnight EST, so that's the New York time zone, and some of the very fast people will compete, like, because it's time-based, and if you get in the top 100 on any day, you get like 1 to 99 points, depending on, how quickly you solved it. Most folks do it sort of just for fun at some point over the next couple days. And in general, it's a super great way to learn new languages. That's what a lot of people use it for. I know my buddy, he's doing it in both Python and Haskell to learn Haskell. So the Python is usually not too bad, and then Haskell takes a bit longer. In years past, it usually starts out quite easy. I remember last year, my goal was to do it in Rust, but then the first problem was like, you're given lines of integers, calculate the maximum of each line, and then the sum of all the maximums. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not doing that in Rust. I'm doing this in APL or BQN, because it's 4 characters. I'm not going to write, I can't even write a single Rust function in the amount of code it's going to be for the whole BQN or APL solution. This year, though, I would say, I don't know what's going. I don't know if because LLMs and ChatGPT came out, they're trying to make it more difficult. But it's been like it was not an easy on-ramp. I thought day 4 was the easiest. The one remark I was going to make is, though, I found that BQN, I miss so much. And I actually saw on Twitter, someone posted an str.nats function. So maybe there's a library out here that I can get the answer to. Is there like a parsing thing out there? Because I dearly miss in APL the partition functions, because BQN sort of got rid of those and replaced them with group, which for doing things like space separating, I don't know the idioms for. I'm sure there's a way that is only a couple characters more, but like for APL, you can just do the not equals partitioned identity fork with whatever your delimiter is on the left. And also, it is very nice in APL that you can just go, you can call the evaluate glyph if you have a string of numbers, and then it'll just turn that into a numeric array. But in BQN, because it doesn't use spaces for stranding, it uses the underscores. You actually have to do something where you split and then turn those in. So like in APL, it's literally a single glyph to take a string that is just integers and turn that into array. And so at one point I solved it, I quote unquote solved it in BQN by pretending I had these 2 array functions and like str dot, ints functions, and then just wrote like the expression code. So anyways, I'll let Marshall respond if there's any resources for folks that are trying to do it in BQN and are missing the partition function or the evaluate function. What do people do? And I know this is a pretty specific way to start our Advent of Code discussion, but answering my questions first, not caring about the listener here.
Yeah, well, I can answer. I mean, one reason to do this section is because I think a lot of the listeners will be wondering, the same things, having the same difficulties. So there is in BQN now, we added, probably in the past year, we added a parse float system function. So if you have a single integer, that'll work just fine. Mm-hmm. You don't have to write. I mean, it's not long. Like it's a reduction in BQN to get the value of an integer from the digits, but also you can just write parse float. For strings with natural numbers, what I mean, I don't run into this because I don't do things that require this sort of parsing really well. Sometimes, but not often. But in the BQN libs, which is my kind of libraries that I wrote for BQN, there's a function called toNats. So it'll take a string, which is just digits and anything at all in between them, and it'll pull all the natural numbers out of that. So if you've got 1, 2, 3 hash star 4, 5, and you call it on that, you'll get 123 and 45. So that's what I use. It's like a 2-line definition. And I mean, there are a lot of other ways you could write it. But basically, yeah, it doesn't have this built in. I mean, you could also just replace the spaces with the ligature character for stranding and evaluate it as BQN. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing as nice as APL's evaluate, which I kind of view as a good thing because I don't want people writing eval everywhere in their code.
It is a cute trick that like is specifically helpful for this kind of advent of coding. It doesn't come up in the real world that commonly. Adam?
I don't participate in advent of code, but I do during December get a lot of questions as to how to do various stuff in APL. And this is one of them. You get these rigid data formats as part of the problem set, and you need to parse in not just numbers, but in general to parse it because they are fixed with or because they're delimited somehow. And something that Dialog APL has a lot of these fancy system functions that do huge jobs for you. And in particular, a relatively new one is quad CSV, the CSV parsing thing, which can do so much more than the classic CSV. You can pretty much use it to parse anything, including, say, space-separated literal numbers in a string. You can just throw that at it. And I think we should include a link in the show notes as well to a video that I made that shows how to parse a lot of different formats using this and all the options that it has. So even if it's a bit too cute to just use execute in APL, there are actually good tools there that safely convert
for doing it
things
the right way. Yeah, I will say that at least, I mean, maybe Bob, you can add for Jay, but the quad nget is like the main thing I use in APL, and then BQN has a system file dot read lines, which is super nice, and that's basically where you can get started for those two. And if you're using VS Code, the BQN, I don't know how you guys have done this, but the BQN plugins are fantastic. So much so that like you basically get the same experience if you're on BQN Pad or Marshall's version on his BQN site. Like the backslash will like automatically convert. Like, so I did not need to install any kind of keyboard. Whatever their plugin is, when I'm at a BQN file, it just knows, oh, we're in BQN land, and it can do the backslash like glyph creating. And it also has autocomplete on like when you hit the system dot and you start typing, it autocompletes, which is fantastic. Like kudos to whoever did that. I'm not sure if it was you, Marshall, or some person out in the wild.
I think that was all Raghu.
Yeah, fantastic work there. And so it's just like, I know I've used the Optima or Optiva. There's a APL plugin, and I think also too the BQN one has like font recognition, and maybe I just have the right fonts or whatever. But anyways, I've used the Optiva, if I'm pronouncing that company's plugin correctly, and it's Optiva. Yeah, it's pretty good, but it doesn't have like the autocomplete, and I don't think it by default has like the conversion into APL glyphs. Anyways, so for folks that are trying both out, there are plugins, check them out, and the BQ one is particularly good. Bob, I don't know if you want to hop in with, for folks that want to do this in J.
What font should people use for J?
I think any fixed width font is probably fine for J. I mean, ASCII.
Wow, that can't be the case.
That's all you need.
So how do I type J again? Do I need like a special keyboard?
Well, let's see. On the keyboard, it's right next to, it's between the H and the K as I'm looking at it right now. So right in the center there. In fact, they put a little bump on the keyboard for the J, so you know where your fingers are. It's really, really easy to find J, unless you're searching for it.
Oh, the way I find J is I find A, P, and L, which are obviously easy on my keyboard, and then just find the midpoint between them. That's where J lives.
Okay. That's a very spatial way to do it. It's a very special way to do it. Anyway, in J, generally what I do is I just load the file down, and then I in the past, all I've done is created a noun with that in there. And in the process of creating the noun, I can take out line feeds or do whatever else I want to make it into a form that I can actually work with. And quite honestly, when I did Advent of Code in the past, that was usually a good quarter of the job, was to try and figure out the format they actually wanted it into so you could work with it.
Yeah.
And then once you got that done, then, there was other stuff to work out. But what it felt like initially the stumbling block was often trying to figure out getting it into the form, which is just, creating a noun. Yeah.
That's the counter, I think that was day 2, the one where I used the Python counters. Like both of those are technically one-liners if you format it 2-liners, but the majority of that problem is that it gives you like a card, some word colon, and then like space delimited with commas and semicolons representing like 2 to 3 different bags. So you need to you have to split like 3 times, first on the colon, then on the semicolon. Then you have to remove the commas because the commas only exist for the n-1 colors. Then you need to split on spaces. And it's just like, that's why I've never done Advent of Code to completion, because usually that kind of problem, like that day 2 problem, that shows up around day 9 or 10 because it's because, and then that's when I'll give up. But when I saw that was day 2, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like what? This is why people don't or like, at least for me, like I love the calculation part, the using a counter, calling a sum, calling a product, a reduction or whatever. But this parsing garbage, like this, no one's having trouble doing this like mentally. It's just a pain to get it in the right format. And it's like, if they did like every other, code forces, but Leet code, they just give you the function and like the list of values. They don't say, we're going to make you parse stuff for 20 minutes and you're going to have 20 lines of code. Anyways, off my little soapbox here. I wanted to ask Brian, because I know when I was checking out your GitHub, I did see that you had an Advent of Code for, I think, 2023. So have you done any of the problems in BQN? I think Marshall even said you might have been trying out Singeli this year.
I have done one problem in BQN this year. Last year I did, I think, 6 parts.
Okay.
The Singeli part is fun. Singeli is a fun language. It's like, Sig comp time?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that, but on steroids.
Okay.
You can write C inline, and it just sometimes works. And I'm still getting the hang of it, but I would say it's a super cool language. I can imagine it being useful for, of course, for optimizing code since it's made for optimizing BQN. But it would be really cool to like use it in game programming even for having really performance sensitive part of the code base being in Singeli. That'd be super cool. I don't. I'm thinking about it, but it's I'm not gonna do anything with that for at least a few months.
Interesting. So what? So you've said you did one in BQN, and have you also just done the same problem in Singeli, or have you done a couple of them in Singeli this year?
Oh, I haven't even done one. I've just been playing around, and then in my free time, I've been preparing for actually this podcast. I've just prepared some notes.
Okay.
So.
Well, if you've got things on your notes that you want to dive into right now, it's a great segue.
I first want to give credit. My first example that got me into making Rayed-BQN, it was made by Null Data Map, which is their username. You can probably find them on Discord. I like so much credit to them. It's great.
And so they were just the inspiration. That was the example that you saw that led to you creating the Rayed-BQN library.
Exactly, yeah. It was also when I started playing around with it. When I started making games with it, and I just got hooked. And then also, credit to Daizama for helping me so much with FFI, and being patient with me because I've asked for help so often. I didn't even know C before I did troubleshooting with FFI.
Wow.
And of course, we're very glad to have, somebody test it out and say, I need this, I need that, to figure out, what parts work, and, what sort of libraries we need to get it to connect to, because the choices you make with that foreign function interface really depend on what sort of stuff you want to do it and see, like what you want to connect to.
It's and the FFI system is incredible. It's like once you get the hang of it, it's very, very nice to use. Another thing I would like to talk about is some like my idea of why would you use Rayed-BQN, right? Because usually for games you want to use some typed language, maybe some safe language. But I love BQN for it since it's a lot less complicated, a lot less variables floating around, a lot less mutation. And honestly, I haven't actually used mutation in all of my examples thus far. With like even my snake game and stuff, I always give the state back to the next loop. So I keep it very functional, and I do that very intentionally because I don't like state, and I really want to limit variable like amounts of variables. And if I have an array of positions, I want to keep it in one variable and mess around with that.
I studied a bit of computer science in university, but I didn't really discover like functional programming as a paradigm until it's like 5 years into after graduating and taking a number of CS courses. I worked, technically I wasn't as a software dev, but I was still writing code. And then I went to my second company, and it was there that there was like a Haskell study group. And so it was because of that study group that I started learning about functional languages. But you've seemed to speed run all the paradigms and find array languages, and you're doing it in this functional way, which I now code very functionally, small functions, minimizing state change, so how did you end up at the, what I consider the golden way to program so quickly? It was just watching stuff on YouTube and seeing, the different styles, or I didn't even have the awareness to know what a paradigm was at the time.
So it was when I did Python. I always wondered why the syntax was so weird when working with some libraries. I worked with a window library actually in Python, and it had classes, and you had to do stuff with them, and you had to define stuff in them, and it was unintuitive to me. And then in APL, it's why don't people just use this kind of system where you just have a function, it does one thing, and it just does it. Some people, when I asked for help in other places with the system, when they talked about it, it just seemed to make sense to them. Not for me, no. It always seemed like magic. Especially since some classes do stuff behind the scenes, and I never liked that. And especially when I learned that Python does what's it called, meta programming with the classes. Sometimes if you make a meta class, it's called, and stuff like that. It was a mess, I would say. And then just going back to the simple ages of just using functions, I like a lot more.
So it's literally just style and preference. You didn't like the way it felt, and you discovered very early that there was a different way to program. So yeah, like we mentioned before, you hadn't been taken to the dark side.
I did actually learn APL before I knew what functional programming was.
Hmm.
So I would say I was already a functional program before I knew what it was. It was just
Yeah.
how my head worked, I think. And I got used to it very quickly. And then when other people do object-oriented stuff, I puke because like just use functions. It's simpler. Look at this. And then I give an example and it's like lots of lines shorter. And it's just, isn't this way simpler? And they're like, no, it's a lot more complicated. And I don't understand.
Yeah, it is. I was looking at the cap implementation several weeks ago in Kotlin, and it's, I think, the only APL implementation that I've looked at that is done in like a class-based inheritance kind of way. And I was trying to make some small change, and I gave myself like 5 or 10 minutes, time boxed it, and I was not successful in making that change. But yeah, you can do some powerful stuff with inheritance systems, but I agree that if you can just stick to the small functions, separate concerns, not inheriting from everything, a dog is an animal, a cat's an animal, blah, 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 I'm like you, I prefer the functional.
Yeah, so Zyma's Java implementations are also, I think, done in a pretty similar style. They have lots of classes and stuff and utilities that are in, this or that class. And yeah, I think I probably had a similar thing when I was with the changes I needed to make in Zyma-BQN. It felt like, everything was kind of hidden. You've got to, like this thing is defined in this class and you use it over here. And it's not always obvious, like what's in between those, I guess.
So wait, Zyma has two different implementations of BQN?
Yeah, so Zyma-BQN was not around for the first like year or so of BQN. And I've never done like a real implementation, but the way it worked was first I adapted Nick Nikolov's NGN APL to use with BQN, and then I started trying to do I worked on the self-hosted aspects of BQN, and then in parallel with that, Zyma, who was he was on the BQN team from the very first announcement that BQN was going to exist. So he converted his Zyma APL to be BQN. And so I started using that instead of my old JavaScript thing as a way to run the self-hosted code. And then for a while I was working with like a hybrid of it was Zyma-BQN, but that didn't have all the functionality implemented into Java. So there was some BQN code on top of that. And then later he made the CBQN that we're using now. And that still uses it uses the BQN compiler, of course, but it also has some of the runtime stuff that's for things that aren't implemented in pure C or Singular.
Interesting. And so that means that Zyma APL, which was the predecessor to Zyma-BQN, is also in Java, assumably.
Yeah.
Interesting. I did not know that. Wow. And so Zyma is this polyglot, just knows all the languages, or does he prefer Java to C, or?
He knows a pretty good number. Yeah, he does prefer. He likes the look of Java, he said. And I guess he's, or at least was, pretty used to object-oriented programming.
Interesting. An array programmer that likes the look of Java. I've never heard such a confusing statement.
It does have the benefit though that Zyma APL is, as far as I know, the only APL implementation that runs natively on Android. That's actually available. That can run on Android, but nobody can get their hands on it.
Yeah, I mean, so can BQN.
Yeah, I know J can run on Android, but it's not APL in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, shots fired. To bring this back around to games, because actually I think there'll be something mentioned in the title about games. Brian and I were talking, I guess, setting this up. And Brian, you actually mentioned something that there was a number of areas that you thought array programming hadn't, like essentially the paradigm has some advantages when it comes to making games that you don't think have been exploited or investigated maybe as well as they should have. Do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, I love array programming with making games since if you have a bitmap, then you just apply it. If you have a coordinates, you just use or you just input them, you map with the drawing function and stuff. One thing that I like a lot is using the last axis stuff with making code a lot more readable. I played with rank a lot, right? And sometimes at one point it was very complicated. I had to do so many transposes and switcheroos and stuff. And then I decided to switch some stuff around, and I decided to make the coordinates array be layer by layer instead of column by column, since if you so the benefit of it being row by row is that if you add two coordinates, to a list or to an array of coordinates, it just maps right away. But what I found is that if you it's a lot more intuitive and a lot nicer if you bind the two numbers with an addition and then using cells modifier in BQN to map to each row. And this removed so many transposes and stuff from my examples. It's amazing. It's because how arrays are like the layers are like nested arrays. So each row is like one nested box, and using cells just maps the addition to the boxes. And this was a lot better, since if you map, let's say, array of booleans on a array of coordinates, you just filter with the slash in BQN, and it works. And that's the biggest breakthrough I had, I'd say. Some other stuff I've been experimenting with, that is using modifiers a lot. One version of the model was where I had, for example, a modifier that was called add, and you put or not an add, it was apply, and then you give a function, and then you use under a transformation and stuff, and just nesting modifiers to make it so that, for example, an addition is relative to the camera and stuff like this. And I just, you know what, screw that. Modifiers. I even talked to in the Discord with Marshall and Daizama, and they both said that I just use functions and I decided to just remove the modifiers and just use functions, and it's a lot easier. It became a lot simpler. Modifiers, use them sparingly. That was one lesson I learned.
When you say modifiers here, are you talking about like user-defined ones? Like you're writing your own modifiers to do fancy stuff, and that just becomes a bit tricky?
And these would be APL operators and J verbs and conjunctions for other language people.
Or Weewa modifiers. I think the array community.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say. I mean, Weewa is the language to do Advent of Code in this year. There's a ton of people doing it.
Is it? Yeah, I don't. I mean, it makes sense. I really wanted to do it in Jelly, but I can't figure out how strings work. So. Bob, you were going to ask a question as well.
Well, I was going to stay sort of on the game topic. Does that change the types of games that you tend to write? Are there some games that fit better into that paradigm than others, or is that just sort of a very foundational basis for writing games in APL or BQN?
Yeah. Whenever I start making a game, I always go with like a grid-based game, because those are always fun to do with array languages. Like Minesweeper. I recently made a new Minesweeper example. And also Snake, stuff like that. I haven't actually done any big games that have a non-blocky kind of look. You know what I mean? Not so I always pick an array-oriented thing, since I think that will be the most beautiful implementation. So I'm kind of biased, but I would say that if you use this for another game that is non-blocky, I think it would be super cool, and maybe it wouldn't be as beautiful, but it surely would use array programming a lot with the Boolean maps and stuff to do conditional logic.
Yeah, I mean, the game that I am going to at some point in my lifetime, right, and probably will use Rayed-BQN is, I think I've mentioned this before, is Scrabble, which unfortunately is a tile-based game. But I think it's interesting because the data structures behind storing your words in a dictionary, they use something called like a trie, and you basically need to do that. Like, I think like trying to represent that in an array language will be interesting, because I always wonder, like, for the things that array languages are good at, they're amazing at them. But then when it comes to things that, it's not their bread and butter, are they still like pretty good and you can get pretty far? or does the language fall over? I'm not enough of an expert to know. I'm sure Marshall would say like you can definitely do anything. You know, you've done tons of array programming in all the languages. So
Well, so a trie, and this is TRIE.
yes, also known as like a prefix or a suffix tree.
I mean, it's really just made of arrays, right? Like very few languages would have it built in. So it's just like at each layer, there's an array of things. I think the problem that you'd get is that, I mean, for like a read-only trie, APL is just perfect because you just you set up the arrays and the arrays contain arrays, so it's one big nested array. But if you want to like add things to it, then you kind of want mutable arrays, and I think it would be fairly hard to get it so that you can do all the updates properly. Like in BQN, I might want to use objects for it. So an object you can kind of make a wrapper object around an array, and then the object's going to be the only thing that knows about the array, so it can mutate it whenever it wants. And so in that way, you sort of get a mutable array. But I mean, then it's an object and it's not an array, so you can't just like select elements and stuff. So I'm thinking that wouldn't be as nice if you need to mutate it.
I would say, why not just make a zero-padded array and mutate a point in the list?
Well, it's got to be nested. So like it's a tree structure where, like, generally the idea of a trie is that at each level, like the levels correspond to elements in the thing that you're trying to look up. So the first level you use as like an index into the first element is used as an index into the first level of the tree, and then the second into the next level, and so on. And so like if you need to start updating this, then you've got to be updating a nested array, and you have like that update has to come through the whole nested structure. So
I mean, the good part is that for a game of Scrabble, you definitely don't need a mutable trie because you have your 100. It's just a 178,000 word list.
Oh, it's just the word list is you just make one on the whole word list. Yeah, so you're probably pretty good in any array language.
Yeah, the confusing or the unclear part for tackling like this kind of game is that, or this kind of aspect of this game is that you need ways to like traverse. Like the way it's designed in Python is it's just like a class with a bunch of methods for, you know, going backwards, forwards, checking whether it's a valid word at this point or a suffix or whatever. Which is very useful in terms of like, you don't want to do a full search every time you're trying to generate word possibilities. You want to search what's possible given your tile rack and what's on the board. And if you try and do it exhaustively, your program is going to screech to a halt. And so I think, I guess you would end up building this trie with nested arrays, and then you would just have some free functions that like, given some information, is able to like traverse the trie, because like they kind of do it by like pointer chasing and stuff in Python.
Yeah, well, I mean, traversing a nested array is just like, all right, pick the first element of the second element of the third element of this array. So that's actually really nice in APL.
Yeah. Well, time will tell. I will. Brian, you were going to say something.
May I? So I want to talk a bit more about what I do in Rayed-BQN with types, since what I like to do is use integers and less floats, because BQN does this where it optimizes the integer down to the lowest type.
Hopefully.
You have to make sure it does that with a system function, but usually BQN figures it out. And I do this with images where I tried to. And then I realized that BQN doesn't optimize for unsigned integers. So I have to wrap them to be signed integers with like modding by, doing some funky stuff to make it within that range. But it's a fun thing, since if I make all the stuff intuitive with like making images and using functions with integers really intuitive, and you can do some stuff with integers, right? Since coordinates are also integers, you can eventually like optimize it pretty well. And I feel like it could be very useful to have actually an optimized game with BQN. But I'm not entirely sure, since it's very hard if you want to compete with like C++.
Yeah, well, you're stuck on the CPU is the big thing until somebody comes along and does a GPU thing and you're not. But so you don't have access to quite the same capabilities, but CPUs are still very fast.
Mm-hmm.
So what are there other recommendations? It sounds like this optimization thing you're kind of playing with right now. What would you, if there's, folks that are listening to this, they've been wanting to get into game programming, and you've now built this, Rayed-BQN, which sits on top of Raylib. What's like what would your recommendation be? Because I know you have, I think, a set of like 10 or so example games that you've written, and it's just in the examples like subdirectory of the GitHub repo. So obviously, the link will be in the show note for folks that want to go check it out. But what would your recommendation be for folks that are trying to build their, first game using Rayed-BQN? Like, is there a golden path to, maximize odds of success on sort of folks' first run at this?
I would, first of all, you have to follow the instructions on installing it, of course. Get one example to run. And then what I would do is playing around and just modifying tiny bits of the code. Maybe make a snake in the snake game move faster, make the arena bigger, or and then go to more complicated stuff like maybe like draw extra stuff on the map, like instead of berries, draw blueberries, or add more types of berries that give power-ups and stuff. That would be my recommendation first. And then afterwards, you can try starting up your own game by copying an example and just pasting it in, and then removing all the code that is the logic of that game. And then you have a bare bones, nothing in it. And then you can look back in the examples and stuff, and then you just give tiny adjustments, and then you draw stuff to the screen, and then you make your game. And hopefully there are no issues, and you can always report an issue because I see them as a to-do list. I'm very happy to see an issue that I can solve.
Awesome. And this might be a question for David, who I think is going to be a future guest, if not future very soon to be guest. Because in one of his videos, it looked like and I think I asked Marshall this, and Marshall said, yeah, I don't know. You'll have to ask, either David or potentially the answer, Brian. He looked like he was doing some kind of like hot reloading. Like he had some screen open and was making live changes, but like he was switching workspaces or whatever, or monitors. So like you couldn't actually tell, was it just the way it was edited? So it looked like it was like a hot reload, meaning that like I don't need to relaunch an executable while I make changes. Do you know if that is what he was doing, or if that's possible? Because that's such a cool way to program like a snake game. If you see like a canvas that's empty, you make a code change, you hit save, and then like it automatically refreshes without having to launch anything.
So he didn't use my hot reloading, though I have designed or made hot reloading. He used what was it? No, he just used editing. But when I did implement it, I realized it doesn't work when mutating variables because the hot reload is very simple, and it just imports functions from a main file and refresh or mutates the functions with the new functions from your work file. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully it does.
So like you might have leftover state that doesn't make sense anymore or something like that.
Yes, exactly. But if you have variables defined outside the main loop, then those would get like either redefined at every hot reload, which is every few seconds when it checks, and then you edit the code and then it refreshes it, which means that you can't use mutation at all with variables outside the loop function or the per frame function. Also, something I should note is that I don't have any async capabilities just yet. So any games that requires that does have limitations.
I'm not enough of a game programmer to know if that's like a very limiting thing.
It's not. You can make basically any game with just per frame a function activating per frame.
Well, good to know in case there is someone in the back of their head thinking of a very specific type of game that requires it. Yeah, I feel like we've skipped around from topic to topic to topic. We've gone back and forth from Advent of Code to Rayed-BQN to for some reason prefix trees. Are there any other kind of topics, things on your you said you had some notes or things you wanted to make sure that you got to, or questions from the other panelists of we have a library implementer here, so
one nice thing about BQN I can talk about is how lovely it is eliminating abstractions. That's also part of the Raylib philosophy as well. Because abstractions get in the way a lot. Although, of course, opening window, that's a good abstraction. But when you have these, just you want to move the position of the camera, well, just add the camera position by one, like just do a +1, and then it moves it one bottom, well, one down and one right, since you add both coordinates. It's simple, and I love it. It removes the abstraction of moving camera relative to what and stuff like that. And turning is also just multiplying the degrees of the camera the camera nested array. Since oh yeah, also I turn the structs from C into just nested BQN arrays, and well, sometimes it's pointers, but I'll see if I can turn those into normal BQN arrays later. You can just modify a variable in these structs, and it just works. If you give it to a C function, since Raylib doesn't hold state, it will just accept it and then run it. Even the font stuff, if you get a font from Raylib and modify the images in the font, it just works, and I love it.
Huh. So it sounds like there's a whole category of like what would be methods in some other library for doing rotations or scaling, which are basically like yielded obsolete or unnecessary because it's just a scalar operation on vectors at the end of the day, or matrices.
And also something I would like to add is in BQN you can generalize so much. So if you have a math library, for example, in Raylib, it has raymath.c, and I just copied it and translated the entire thing. It's like 2,000 lines to BQN, and I then, after doing that, which took like a few days, I generalized some of the functions. For example, if there was function that did vector 2 x and then vector 3 x, I just made them both work on any vector of any size. Yeah, that was I was very happy doing that because it's very satisfying just generalizing all the functions. Also, Raylib always uses 4x4 matrices. But Rayed-BQN can use any size matrices because the Raymath library that I've made in raymath.bqn, it supports any size matrices for any calculation with the math library, which is awesome. Super cool.
Out of curiosity, how many lines of BQN did the translated 2,000 lines of the math.c code end up being?
I'll have to double check. Give me if you'd like to give me a minute, maybe someone else can talk.
Adam, what's up?
Well, to fill this time, I thought I'd mention something interesting, and going back to this advent of code thing, and how do you win, so to say, advent of code? How do you consistently get on the first spot every year? And there's one person. His name is known under the name Beta Veros, I think. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Who consistently places first. And the way this person has done it is by making a programming language specifically to speedrun advent of code. Kind of similar to how Jelly is made specifically to win code golf challenges on average. And this person has written this blog post about the design of this language. And if based on that, I can say with confidence that this person is at least somewhat familiar with the APL language family. So maybe there's something to it. I just thought that was interesting.
I did just check too, and my Python program's still running. And it is updating the minimum location. This is for day 5 for those that are, if there's listeners that also struggle with this. So it's just I'm printing the minimums constantly, and then every once in a while it changes because it finds a new one. But the current minimum that it's at is not the correct answer. I think I've checked like 3 or 4 of them. So we'll just, maybe we'll just let it run forever. And on day 12 of Advent of Code, it'll come up, All right, Brian's he's still searching.
I found the Raylib file, and I now found the BQN file. So without removing any comments, which there are a lot of, the result turned into 550 lines.
That's pretty good. 75% saving.
So I saved 4x lines without removing any comments. So I think that's a win. And the functions are generalized.
There's many reasons why less code is better. The number of bugs per lines of code. But my favorite thing is, the best code is the code that I don't have to write. All right. Any last questions from our panelists.
I'd like to know where you see your future with regards to this whole array language venture.
Like a job interview.
Yeah, Adam doesn't happen to be the programming language lead at a company that may or may not have a.
Well, we're not looking to hire anybody right now. I'm genuinely curious because I mean I had a hand in getting you started with APL, and I'd like to know like, is it even something that people might consider continuing with, even professionally, or is it just a toy?
And to add on to Adam's question, I don't actually think if explicitly it came up. We chatted about the fact that you're in the Faroe Islands and you're 18, but what are you currently? Are you working? Are you going to school?
One at a time. Let's try first. I'm from Faroe Islands. I work at a company called Intra, but I haven't worked there for a while. I've taken like a long break, but I'm technically still employed there. I am in school. I'm in Teknisk Skole Klaksvik, which is a technical school in Klaksvik, I guess, since Klaksvik isn't anglicized. I'm finishing my last year there, which is very exciting. Right, and then the Adams question was interesting. What was it?
What does the future hold for the author of Rayed-BQN?
I've talked with a few friends of mine of like, do you want like my friends ask, do you want to make a commercial? Like, do you want to get money from it and like stuff like that? And I don't know. I haven't thought, or I have thought about it. I just don't know how to get money from this type of stuff. And I've always dreamed of like being able to program Rayed-BQN and earning enough money to buy what I need. It's a dream. I don't think I'll make it with Rayed-BQN since it's open source, of course. I've dreamt about making a game engine with it, but that's like probably not gonna happen. But it's a dream, right?
Here's an interesting idea for you. It is definitely not why I asked you about this because I didn't have that in mind. It's just something popped into my head now. At some dialog user meetings and even in one of the APL seeds that happened, there's a presentation by somebody named Thomas Gustafsson, and he has pretty much single-handedly made, I think, the only large, if you can call it, game in APL or like commercial thing. It is a ship and boat simulator made for training actual, captains to be to navigate through between small islands and waterways and open seas and then weather and so on. And it's used really commercially, like to train Coast Guard military personnel and so on. However, it's also clear that some of his technology stack. So he, like you said, Dialog's Windows GUI capabilities are not made for this kind of thing. So he has some custom made 3D engine that he interfaces with from his APL code, and then that renders to through some layers to actual something that looks like a modern day video game quality. But there might be an opportunity if this is the kind of thing you want to do. This is the actual commercial thing. He needs to replace some of those layers to be able to continue on what's in the future and something more modern.
That would be awesome. I wish I was that technical. I have never messed with well, Raylib does have 3D capabilities, but it's a very low level library. It doesn't have a well, what doesn't it have? I guess it has quite a lot actually. I could see that thing could be implemented with my library, but it's a very huge project in my head. It's like you have to collect map data and you have to have ocean graphics and stuff.
Oh no, I wasn't suggesting that you clone his product. That would no.
Oh no, that's not it either. Just talking about how like making something that complicated, and making it successful. Maybe if I made a product with my library, it doesn't need to be that complicated or use that stuff. I mean, it uses what it has, of course.
Yeah, I don't know what his requirements are, how much he does on the APL side, and how much is done by this library thing. But I mean, you know APL fairly well. I don't think he would want to interface with a BQN thing then to learn a new language for that. But it might be something to look into, and something at least in your kind of area, and this a needed thing, and something you might actually be able to make a living of.
I really am looking forward to my future and see if I can get something to work. It would be very cool.
Well, I can definitely put you in touch with him if you want me to.
I would love to talk about it, like talk to him about it. It would be interesting.
Maybe we should get him on as a guest here as well.
I think he's on our I was going to say short list, our very long list of
Our increasingly long list.
yes, which I have. We are in a good position where our list grows longer or at a faster rate than the rate that we interview folks. But yeah, I mean, it's funny hearing you say that, like, oh, seems like a daunting, complicated endeavor coming from someone your age that has speedrun through like most of the paradigms that I hadn't even heard of. Like I was barely even a programmer at your age, and you've already, you're building libraries, doing FFI stuff. You're basically trailblazing. So to hear you say like, oh, that sounds a bit tricky, there's a bit of irony in that, because I don't think you realize, the complexity of what you're already doing is up there. So, I guess I'll say, thanks for your work. I know Marshall's definitely appreciative of what you're doing, and
Oh, yeah.
I hope that I don't actually know what the age distribution of folks are that listen to our podcast, but I hope that if there's some younger folks that they're inspired to maybe take a stab at building something like this, whether it's in the FFI space with BQN or J or APL or Weewa, any of the languages these days. Because that's a sort of a good anecdote to end on, is that I think people underestimate how willing folks would be, whether that's Marshall and friends for BQN or other folks. I know in the C++ community, some of the experts in certain libraries ended up becoming experts because they started building something, and then they reached out to the current expert, and then they were helping out with what they were working on. And because they are basically doing something to help out with their initiative, they end up getting all this like free mentoring and basically like free education. So yeah, don't be afraid to, if you want to start building something, you'd be surprised how willing it's like, oh, you're going to build something for my language that I've created or my project that I'm working on. People get really, really excited about that. Like whenever anyone opens up PRs on my stuff and they've done work, I'm like, wow, you've done free work for me. Why would I not want to merge this? So yeah, thanks for, all the work that you've done. It's going to be very exciting to see what you do over the next couple of years. And, if you do have some big updates or new libraries that you work on, hopefully we'll be able to keep in touch and maybe bring you on in a couple of years or so. To get more updates from the Faroe Islands. Maybe you'll have moved. So, but we will discover in due time. Thanks for coming on. This has been a blast. And I guess we have to throw it to Bob first, and he will tell the listeners.
Well, we now have a correspondent on the Faroe Islands, so that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. We need to start asking. We don't do that. I know other podcasts, they ask their guests where they're at. Maybe we should start doing that, and we should build a little map of all the different places. Probably the Faroe Islands has got to be the uniquest place that although we've had a few people in Australia as well.
I was going to say Australia, the time zones are kind of crazy with those things, but
yeah. But Australia has trains, so it's
And with that, we'll mention that if you want to get in touch with us, you can get in touch with us at contact@arraycast.com. And we will have show notes on this show, as we always do. And so if you want to get deeper into these things, the show notes may help you out. If you have questions, you can use contact@arraycast.com, and we can, of course, forward any questions to Brian. And thanks so much for being on, Brian. And I look forward to seeing what you do. I think a lot of times when people are breaking new ground, the next step always looks kind of wild and confusing. As Connor says, what you don't realize is where you're living right now is kind of wild and confusing to a lot of other people. And the next step will always look that way. So don't worry about that. Just keep on marching through and see what you find out. Because there's so many different languages. There's so many different things to discover right now. It's quite impressive if you've got the energy and the focus to be able to do these things. There's a lot of things you can do these days. So congratulations for the library, and thanks for helping out in all this kind of stuff for other people that are going to use your library to explore other areas.
Thank you so much.
And with that, we will say happy array programming.
Happy
Happy
array
programming.
Programming.